Thought you might appreciate my little
I love
gay
your
mug
rainbow
here.
mug. I love that queer little mug.
Yep, it's nice, subtle. The subtle. I have a way less subtle gay mug that says it's like a rainbow font, and it says like that gay shit on it.
Yes.
This is the subtle one that
This
I
is
can bring
one
to work.
I was gonna say that's the one for work. Yeah, that's the one that's safe for
Hmm.
work. Mm.
Yeah.
Welcome everybody to Out in the Woods. It's me, your friendly neighborhood host, Jacob. And today I have a very special guest, the incredibly talented artist, very sweet human, fellow MSA alumnus, Anna Yates. Hello, Anna. How are you doing?
I am doing swell. Hello to you.
So, me and you were talking right before we started recording. You are actually, I believe, the first fellow MSA alum that I've actually had on the show. I don't know why I haven't had anybody else yet. I guess I don't know if I've had any alums approach me actually, but I
Time to call them out.
time to call. This is a call out post. If you're out there listening, I'm gonna add every single one of you. No. So you and I definitely have a very, I mean, the experience of Mississippi School of the Arts is like no other. Um, it is definitely an invaluable education, and it is definitely an invaluable experience interpersonally as well. I think being thrust together um, in this boarding school where you're all just surrounded by a bunch of artists. It's something else. It's something else. People think back on high school sometimes and it makes them cringe. Now imagine that, but you're in arts high school and and you live with all of your peers. So yeah, Anna, thank you so much for being here. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Where are you from and what do you do?
Hi, so I am originally from Hernando, Mississippi. I'm now currently in Oxford, Mississippi, and I am a lot of things, but first and foremost, an artist, a visual artist. Um, and yeah, that's the long and the short of that.
And what a visual artist you are. We're gonna get a little bit more into that as we get into it. But continuing on, when did you know, Anna, that you were different?
So I think when I think back on it, I think I've kind of figured it out with certainty when I was about 14. Um, and what I say when I mean figured it out is that I am bi, and I will say up front, I'm one of those people that uses pan and bi interchangeably. They mean the same thing to me. But I like how bi sounds better. Um,
Mhm.
but anyway, so I figured that out when I was about 14. And like I had thoughts about people of like, genders besides male before that, but I kind of, I guess, shunned it aside until I was about ninth grade. And I remember that because that's when I had like my first crush on a girl. But yeah, it's about that time.
Did you grow up in a particularly religious household?
Um, I did, well, I didn't, I didn't. It was kind of weird. Like different sections of my family were different levels of religious and had different Protestant faiths guiding them.
Hmm.
Like I was raised primarily Methodist, which I think of as the vanilla of Protestantism. Uh, um, but like I also have family members that were super Baptist and also family members that were really Pentecostal, and they definitely had probably the most lasting effects, for better or for worse, on me. So yeah, it bounced around a lot. Um, so yeah, it was fairly religious, um, but at the same time also like very like they encouraged a lot of critical thinking. which I think is a little rare in religious families. So
Absolutely.
I was raised religious, but I also had a little bit of freedom to like question things sometimes, you know?
Yeah, so did you necessarily feel like, being not straight was an issue for your family?
Yeah, I did. It was a big, I mean, and it still is an issue for my family. Not all of my family. Um, kind of depends on which side you talk to.
Yeah.
My parents are divorced, and like, you know, it's one thing to be a child of divorce. It's another thing to have when both of your parents' families are like completely opposite leaning politically.
Yeah.
That makes for kind of a weird situation too. So again, it kind of depended, but generally my whole family is kind of like not that cool with it, and my immediate family, and by that really I just mean like my mom and my sister, were always kind of like, maybe keep it on the down low. Like we love you, but
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
don't tell anybody else. Um, so yeah, that kind of sucked, but it could have been worse. Is kind of the way that I think of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Um, so let's see. Honestly, like I guess like I always knew that you weren't 100% straight. Like I just always having
Like
have have
something gave it away.
right, like having grown close to you at MSA, and our little bond and our little friendship there, I never of course like questioned, but I never asked directly, but I was always like, I just know that this girl right here, this person, she cannot be 100% heterosexual. Um, Also, were you in Miss Warren's class with me?
uh, I think. Oh my God, I was. I
Oh
remember.
my God. So this was not even on the agenda to talk about, y'all. This was not
You just
even
had a
on the
flashback.
agenda. I was just like, yeah, I just did. I was like, I just don't. So, in the very first, okay, everyone, here we go. This wasn't on the agenda, but now that we're here, you know, um, I know in the very first episode of Out in the Woods, I talked about how someone had tried to exorcise the gay out of me.
Yes.
It's- and
Oh my
so
God.
Anna, what do you remember about Miss Warren's class? Do you remember learning a lot?
Well, I remember learning some things. It wasn't history, which was, well, no, it was like economics or
Economics,
something.
government and
Really,
economics.
yeah, boy, I remember. Oh my God, I remember her like every day. She basically, I think she was kind of just like using our classroom to be like a practice run for when she went and preached at night because she was a preacher. Um, I remember that about her. Um, but like I remember that she ranted about ooh, I remember one in particular, one rant where she talked about how like she did the whole chewed gum metaphor for women's virginity, where like if you give yourself away, you're basically like chewed up gum and no one will want you. I remember that.
So, once again, I wasn't expecting to like have this bombshell happen on this episode, but now like I'm here and honestly, Anna, thank you for being here with me because I'm
Yes.
I'm not I'm not editing this out. I'm not editing this out.
Oh,
Um
don't.
I'm not. And so,
The people need to
yeah,
know.
the people need to know. Yeah, I remember, she would just basically like give us, the answer forms to a lot of the tests on the study guides and everything like that. And then she'd be like, all right, let's go talk about Christ. And so like, yeah, I remember her talking about the different spiritual gifts. That's how she got me. I was, questioning my sexuality. I was basically, at a point of self-loathing because of my
Hmm.
sexuality, because of my sin. And, I saw her as like some kind of
Ah, the
spiritual.
classic stage.
Absolutely. And, hilariously enough, I was just like, I really trust this woman. Like, I really think that she could be like the one to like help me. And honestly, there was part of me that almost believed like, I'm gonna like come to her about this and she's gonna be really cool about it and she's gonna like validate me and make me feel good. And honestly, y'all, that is the opposite of what happened. One of her spiritual gifts was that she had the power of the discernment of spirits. And which basically is like, I can see entities, and I mean, she would tell stories about how she would, go whenever she would get there in the mornings before all the students would come in, she would go around and she would see all of the spirits that lived in the hallways of Johnson Institute, the main building at MSA. And yeah, and just confront the demons that lived there. And she told me that I had the demon of homosexuality living inside of me. And there, if anyone out there knows me, you've probably already heard the story, but this is for the people that aren't out there. And this may even give you like some deeper insight, especially having somebody else that was there. But she cornered me and she kind of groomed me and two other students who I guess were questioning, and basically roped us in and started letting us come to church with her. And then there was graduation night for the seniors at the church, and we were the only people. So she had us there, and she, I didn't see anybody else get exercise, but I sure as fuck did. They all like gathered around me and like put anointed oil on my forehead and like spoke in tongues over me and like pushed me down. um and yeah, so like um that was yeah, that was an experience that I had. So
Yeah.
and like like MSA, and that's the thing, like MSA was, you kind of ran the gambit because there were students that were LGBTQ that were out and proud, like my former roommate Erin Cooper, God rest her soul, Nefertiti. um and like, I don't know, they weren't I never saw them be treated differently. um but that may have also I may have also had the blinders on at the time. um I don't know, but it was really weird, and it's really weird now, Anna, and I'm sure you've noticed this because like so many people have such like a lasting like fond memory of that teacher,
Of Miss Warren.
of Miss Warren. Yeah, as far as I know,
Yeah.
a lot of people are like, she really touched my life, she like was like so much
Well,
fun.
yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because it's like I had a similar experience with like a spiritual leader prior to Miss Warren. Like I think it was when I was in like 10, it was right before I came to MSA, I think. It
Uh-huh.
was when I was in 10th grade. I had a similar experience where like he didn't try to exercise me or anything, thank God. Um, ironically. But um but I was a little bit more like aware of that type of that manipulation that the church uses, whether intentionally or not individually. But um I do remember people being fond of her. I was never fond of her. And I think that for the most part I was largely ignored by her, which I'm glad about. Um but I think that, when I saw people be roped in, um, and I can only speak from the vaguest of like memories of this
Yeah,
particular thing
because it was
happening. I
almost a
do remember
decade
it
ago.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do remember people like, having been invited to go to church with her and that sort of thing. Like I remember people talking about that. Um, but what I was getting at is that like, it's not even that I think that the people who do that, like people who are very, very invested in particular, like Southern Christianity, um, it's not even that I think that those people come with ill intentions. I typically think that they don't. There's definitely people who do. And that, and the ways in which they use it are pretty heinous, but um there is something about the mindset of like Southern Protestantism in particular that, at least in my opinion, I feel like it really makes you gaslight yourself a lot,
Yeah, no,
especially when you're a
absolutely.
teen. And like I had already gone through that stage of like kind of hating myself for being who I was, and like doing all this like when I was alone questioning who I was, and that was really, really tough. Um, and I'm in a way like the only thing that kind of saved me from like getting more into it was that I did go to MSA and just had to leave the church that I was going to.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that happened. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting thing, the way that that mentality happens, and then the way it's fostered, and like the way that those people can pick up on that weakness and use it, even if they don't think they're being predatory about it, but that's the tactics they're taught by the church to use, and they
Right.
do, and they're
Right.
very effective.
And honestly, I mean, and Anna, you talk about feeling like you were ignored by her, but generally, and we can get more into this, but your art itself has always taken on somewhat of a darker quality. Me and you would joke on the bus about how you were going to get a little black billy goat and name it Beelzy, short for Beelzebub.
Yes.
Um, have you haven't accomplished that goal yet, have you?
No, goats are a lot of money. I have an evil cat, and she's a little black cat, and she's pretty mean, so she suffices.
Yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say she'll suffice. But yeah, and that's the thing, like once again, your work has always taken on a darker quality. And I guess that can lead me into this other unscripted question, which is like, did that kind of come out of that headspace that you were in as someone who was questioning their sexuality and someone who didn't necessarily feel like they were getting attention, much less giving themselves the attention they needed?
mhm. Um, I think that like the thing about like darkness in my work, and when you really take apart darkness and kind of lay it out and see what it means, like um I've always been interested in subject matter that was like not as palatable. Um, and I wouldn't even say that my work now is quite like that, but I think that's just because my own definition of that has changed so much over time. Like if you show me art that has like, I don't know, dead animals in it, or like bones or whatever, like it doesn't phase me at all. And it isn't because I'm like so special and like, ooh, nothing dark phases me. It's just because it's everywhere, and it
Yeah.
really doesn't phase people as much as you think it does. And I remember that like I used to be really scared, and this that I do think relates in some way to like it has a similar pattern of thought to the fear that I had about being bi when I was younger. Um, I used to be really scared of my family seeing my art.
Hmm.
Um, and like I remember, like even at MSA when we had that like senior show,
Hmm.
I remember being kind of scared of like what my mom would think when she came and saw it. And then the same thing happened again for my bachelor's thesis exhibition. My Pentecostal family came to see it, and I didn't tell them in advance that I was like subtly criticizing their religion in
Hmm.
my work. And
Hmm.
like I had a piece that by itself was about the conflicting feelings I had growing up LGBT in Mississippi. The piece was it was these two albino stags like embracing each other, and they had arrows all in them.
Hmm.
And the whole thing about it was supposed to be that like um, most albino animals that are born in the wild don't make it to adulthood because they stand out too much, and they're easy to become prey. And so to have
Hmm.
two adult stags that are male and embracing each other is meant to be kind of a stand-in, um, and kind of relate to like the hunting culture of the South too.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and I think of that show, that was my best piece, but there was a lot more subtlety to like my fine art. I would say that, like, yes, I was criticizing religion and talking like openly about my feelings in my art, but if you weren't also an artist, you might not pick up on those things.
Yeah.
But that was my old work. Um, like that was my bachelor's, and my master's was a lot more abstract and didn't really talk about that in particular. Um, but yeah, I don't sorry, I feel like I ran away with your question.
No, it's okay. It's
Um,
okay. Um, I specifically remember, and I don't know if I'm on the money whenever, I say this, but I remember how striking your senior stuff at MSA was. I specifically
oh,
remember like like you did some great shadow work where you had like these cutouts and their
oh,
shadows
I
were
remember
were
those.
like projected on, like their shadows were like cast onto a background. And I remember one of them was like, like the stereotypical like devil with the horns and everything holding two like shopping bags. And like, was that like kind of like a criticism of consumerism for you?
Yeah, it was a criticism of consumerism about as deep as a, 17-year-old could understand it at the time.
Right, right.
Um,
It was still really good though. Like it was still, I mean, it was
thanks.
still, I mean, at the very least, the execution at the very least was definitely more than like a normal 17-year-old. I can definitely say.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I mean, I'd give myself the same credit there. Like, it goes back to like for all of its like imperfections, like having gone to MSA was a really, really formative experience for me. And it put me like miles ahead in terms of both artistic and personal growth, when I entered college, that I simply would not have had if I hadn't gone. And I'm really, really grateful for that.
Mm.
Um, so yeah.
Um, I also own one of your pieces.
You do.
I do. I own Red Horse No Rider, I believe is the
Mm-hmm.
title. Um, what and honestly, y'all, once again, I highly recommend that y'all follow Anna's work because it's really incredible. It's really striking. I saw some of her work and I mean, I had to have it. I had to like drop a bill on it. So like what was like for that portion, for that, I guess, that series,
Mm-hmm.
what was the general like overarching idea for that?
So the piece that you got was part of this series of small charcoal and chalk pastel drawings I did. Um, they were leading towards my master's work, but that series by itself I call The Summer That Never Was, and it took place during 2020. I so I went to Ohio for my master's, and
Hmm.
when the pandemic like started getting really serious back in March 2020, I like scooped up my cat and a couple of my supplies for my studio in Ohio and just drove back home, and I quarantined with my current partner um in his tiny dark apartment.
Hmm.
And I didn't have any, I had all this like space and stuff where I could spread out and do all this stuff that I had planned on doing, and
Hmm.
suddenly I didn't have any of that. And so I started making these, I started getting into chalk pastels, because it was very like direct. I didn't have to take up that much space to use them.
Hmm.
And I also was starting to discover like the potential of color
Hmm.
in a way that I hadn't before. But anyway, um, when I was making your piece specifically, and the pieces kind of surrounding it, I was thinking a lot about surrealism, um, because I think it's pretty clear to see that like the time we were and are currently living in is very surreal,
Yeah.
and very existentially like troubling. Um, and with that specific piece, I was thinking about the like, the four horses of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And horses have made different appearances in my work just because I horses are pretty and I like drawing them.
You're not a
But
horse girl, are you?
I'm not a horse girl. I should have been, I think, but I mean, I do know how to ride horses, but I never had one, so it was kind of like, well, but but they're very beautiful creatures. And anyway, um, I was thinking about the weirdness, like the weird like relationship I was having with interior space, and thinking about walls and corners and blank walls and blank corners and like I don't know, just the amalgamation of like all of the like dread I was feeling combined with being
Mm-hmm.
in this enclosed space that I had no control over,
Mm-hmm.
which is a big thing for me, having control over a space. Um, and so yeah, all of that went into that series, and they're all small works, those in particular. um, they led towards much bigger pieces that became my master's thesis, um, that are probably even more surreal and abstract, and a bit broader in what they're trying to do.
Uh-huh.
um, but yeah, so that's, I hope that answers kind of what your
That
piece is
does,
about.
that does. No, I mean, I'm trying to get down to you. So like, yeah, absolutely. So I guess like broadening out the scope a little bit, kind of turning a little bit away from your art, and focusing more in on your identity. Um, what are the perfect characteristics of a male mate and a female mate for you? And where do they intertwine?
So honestly, I pretty much look for like ideal qualities in a partner, in this, like it's kind of regardless of their gender. I'm kind of looking for the same things. Like, um, honestly, my current partner, and this is going to be corny for a second, but he embodies a lot of what I find like attractive and important in a relationship. He's really ambitious, he's self-sufficient, he understands the creative drive because he is also a creative person.
Mhm.
um, he's cognizant of social issues, which is a very big important thing for me. And he's also just really witty. Like he has a very smart sense of humor and like keeps me on my toes. Um, so I love him. Um, I think that you know, like what it boils down to, I think, is that a good partner, whatever their gender may be, um, I think they should inspire you to want to be a better person. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
not because you're bad, but because a person can always like improve somehow. And he definitely does that for me. And I like to think that I do the same for him. And we're always building each other up, towards what we want to do. Um, so those are the things that I find really important. Also, like as far as like superficial things, like I like men and women who look like Dracula. Um, so
Nosferatu, what are you doing to me?
so that's an easier answer. Just give me goth, just dark, brooding. That's all I
So,
need.
so Madam, what is her name from the new Resident Evil game?
Oh,
Madam, oh
Lady
my,
Dimitrescu.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, we stand her.
Vampire mommy. Um, um, excellent, excellent. So, do you have any experience with the stigma of being bi? And I guess outside of that pan, and I guess I should like edit my former statement really quick to like include people who are not on the gender binary. So, have you experienced any stigma? Because I know that there is, stigma.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird subject, like, because on the one hand, like, I recognize that I have a lot of, well, first of all, I'm just lucky that I was just born in the circumstances I was born into. Um, like, I have a fairly like loving family, even if they don't know everything about me. Like, I grew up in a place where I always had support for what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. And regardless of the fruity business. Um, and so and also like currently like I'm dating a cis het man, and so I have a lot of like straight passing privilege, and I've dated like women and non-binary here and there. Um, and I definitely experienced it more under those circumstances, but when I wasn't dating them and I was dating men, like I didn't experience it a whole lot. That said, so that's one hand, right? Like I'm trying to be like aware of the fact that like I definitely have it better than most LGBT people, I think.
Mhm.
Um, on the other hand, though, like there's also a problem with biphobia or even just bi erasure in the world. And like I've definitely experienced that. Like I remember one of the reasons, besides just my family, that I was so scared to be out in like high school was because like I got told very early by other gay teens that like I was faking it for attention if I was bi. That's a pretty common one. But so that and it made me like question myself as like, well, am I faking it for attention? Why would I do that?
Right.
Like, I don't want to fake it for attention. That seems like a shitty thing to do. Um, so I've experienced some of that. Um, I've experienced the whole like, oh well, and this is the gross one of like, oh well, you're bi, I can turn you straight. Like it's not that hard,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, but but then other times like even like even though I'm not like all the way gay, I still have experienced homophobia too, so it's weird to kind of experience it from both like the straights and like the LGBT community,
Right.
and
Like,
that can feel very alienating.
absolutely. And queer folks out there listening, hug your bi friends, hug your pan friends, because that kind of stigma is just as delegitimizing and just as isolating as the religious trauma that we go through, just as much as the homophobia that we go through. you know um just because, Anna, that you are in a heteronormative relationship does not make you any less bisexual, and
That's right.
that's just that's just, let that be the end of that. And also I imagine like on Tinder, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are like looking for a unicorn, like there's
Oh,
like
that's the grossest thing.
the sexual stigma of being like, me and my girlfriend want to try something out.
He's like, I think I'm having gay thoughts, but I don't want to confront myself about it yet.
Right. Exactly. Maybe two women will make me straight.
Hmm.
So moving back to your artwork, let's talk about the Ballad of the Witch Doctor.
Yay.
I read the first bit that you released online.
I'm so glad.
First of all, I mean, the artwork is so professional. I mean, for a comic that you're releasing on the web, I mean, thank you for, it's just a blessing that we're getting it for free, because
Yeah.
I'm kind of already enjoying where like the concept is going. I think the artwork just looks like it belongs in a printed comic book.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, it just like rekindled like, I guess, how much I respect you as an artist, because I'm like, oh my God, like, holy shit, like she's doing the damn thing. But yeah, no, I mean, so let's talk about it. So like, where did the concept come from? Like, what is the plot for you? Because once again, like, what we get, I mean, it's kind of an introduction and it's kind of not. Like, it feels more like a breadcrumb than anything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this web comic, and I'm glad you pointed it out because it is purposefully very slow pace. That's kind of the nature of the medium, but also just the nature of this particular story. So I don't know if you can read it on my shirt here, but I am a huge nerd for Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing it for since I think like 2016.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it originally started as a D&D character backstory.
Uh-huh.
Um, and like that campaign, we played it for like a year and a half and then it ended. But I was still attached to the main character, Corvus.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and while I was in grad school, I started having this idea of like, okay, I could make this into a comic. And I started putting all of my spare time when I wasn't, I kind of think of it as like my other thesis, like my secret thesis.
Yeah, yeah.
Because when I wasn't working on like the stuff for school, I was doing this. I was writing plot outlines, I was drawing character art and design and environmental design. Um, I was heavily like working with my best friend Hunter, who is also a writer, um, to like iron out like plot holes and character development and things like that. And what's interesting too is that like so he as a character, you know, when I first made him, he was supposed to be kind of a joke. Like I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if there was like a plague doctor who was a necromancer in D&D? And then the plague actually happened in real life. And
In
I was
real
like,
life.
cool, that's kind of eerie. And suddenly kind of he and his story kind of gained a whole new meaning. Um, and like I started getting this idea of like, okay, this story could really potentially say a lot about like, you know, how I might process living in this time through the lens of fantasy.
Yeah.
Um, and I got really into researching opera while I was in grad school. I started reading a lot of operas, and I got really into the story of Faust.
Yeah, Dr.
Um,
Faustus, yeah.
yes,
You
yes,
used
and
a quote.
it makes me so happy because no one ever knows like who Faust is, and I'm like, Faust is in everything. Like,
Right. Thank you,
there is a bit,
MSA. Thank you, MSA, for
yes.
yeah.
I mean, the classic Southern story of like, uh, you know, the meeting the devil at the crossroads to trade your
Right.
soul away. That's a Faustian narrative.
Right.
Um, and so I got really into that idea, um, and that ended up heavily influencing the story that I had already written, and I decided to kind of lean into it. And basically, how I would define this comic now is that I am making this an interpretation of the story of Faust, um, my interpretation.
Right.
Um, and basically, you know, now is like what you know what happens if there's a gay plague doctor who's also a magician, uh,
Hmm.
like what goes on there. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the long and the short of it. I don't want to like give too much away. But you know, if you know the story of Faust, you can probably guess some things.
I was gonna
But
say, well, now that I know, I'm like, okay, I can kind of maybe see where this is going, but I feel still like you're going to deviate from the source material.
yeah, I
I
mean,
feel like I
I
can
have
feel
to a little
that,
bit.
and all, and I feel like this is a lot. I feel like the idea, once again, go read the comic for your, go read what we have of the comic so far, people. But I feel like this is going to be a lot more emotionally intense than Dr. Faustus was, because I feel like this is going to, the whole thing about Faust, or Faustus, was that it was more so from his own ego. Like he sold his
Hmm.
soul for the purposes of his own ego. But I can see things being a lot more driven by emotion and care and love in this one. The folly, kind of like the fall of Anakin Skywalker,
Yes.
um so yeah, very very excited to see where that goes. Once again, so
Thank you.
impressed and so in love with what you have so far. Just really like honored to like know you, and just see you thriving in that way. um do you mind answering? I mean, do you know, like, has there been a response from people generally from it? Are you able to look at numbers or anything like that?
I don't want to have any like hard numbers down. Mainly because I mean, honestly, yes, I haven't really looked at the analytics. In a way, I'm kind of avoiding getting caught up in that because like
Absolutely,
what I
absolutely.
what I ultimately decided for myself, because it's a totally different medium than what I've ever worked in. It requires a different mindset than the type of mindset you would have in the fine art world, where that's more about like getting into galleries and shows, and it's not as much about quantity as it is about like, you know, how you know, big name are the people that are seeing your work,
Yeah,
how prestigious are the exhibitions that you're getting into.
right.
Whereas this I feel is a lot more like I'm leaning more into how one runs the gamut in popular culture. And um I've 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 never had as much response to something I was making as I've had with this comic, and that makes me thrilled because yeah, you know, a lot of the people that are reading my comic and you know, engaging with it, most of them aren't artists. Or if they are, they might be very young artists who aren't, you know, don't have a master's like I do. And I'm not saying that to be like, oh, well, they're not going to understand it. I'm saying that in that I actually care more about people who aren't in the elite um understanding this than I do care about, you know,
Absolutely.
that tiny group of people being privy to it. Like when I think back about the art that influences me the most, you know, I can probably like, you know, name drop some like big visual artists of our time.
Yeah,
Um, but when you look in the grand scheme of things, like those aren't the things that really influenced me. Like my biggest influence as an art piece has been a series of video games. The Team Eco video games, Eco and Shadow of the Colossus and Last Guardian were the one of the biggest influences on me growing up. Lord of the Rings, the movies and the books, um, were some of my biggest influences. And like, you know, those are the things that I remember.
yeah,
Those are the things that inform what I'm doing now. And so, like, for me, it's a little bit more important. And it's also a reason why I wanted to make it free. I wanted this particular project, this body of work, the comic, to be more accessible, because that's the stuff that really makes a difference, in my opinion. Um,
absolutely.
and so I'm just really excited to get to engage with art and how I, you know, navigate it in this new to me way, you know.
Absolutely.
Um,
Well, and also, you know, not to mention the fact that like the comic book industry itself is kind of like going through like it's going through something right now because, you know, despite the fact that comic
yeah,
book movies are huge right now, it's hard to actually get people to pay for comic books, especially with them being available for free on the internet, or rather, you know, illegally free on the internet, but free
yeah,
nonetheless. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's really, I think like doing it for the quality and doing it just for people is a lot smarter and honestly a lot more, you know, it shows a lot more integrity in a way, you know.
I hope so. I mean, that's
Which
the
is
thing is
nothing
like,
wrong if you were like, I really want Marvel to pick up my comic and, you know, make it one of
yeah,
their, you know, but
no, I mean, if like, you know, if when I'm done with it, Netflix wants to pick it up and turn it into an animated series, I am going to like jump for joy. But like it's definitely money is not the primary focus for me. You know, I kept saying that like if just like a handful of people read it and take something away from it, if like 5 people get invested in it, that'll be enough for me. Because I just want to have done it and then say that I did it at the end. And
absolutely.
that's the primary goal. And if other cool stuff happens along the way, that's awesome. But it's, you know, if nobody reads it, it's not going to stop me from making it from start to finish.
Absolutely.
Um, at least that's the, and you know, I will say that like, you know, the realm of like every artist has to like promote themselves on social media in order to like have any kind of standing.
Yes.
Even the like classic fine artists who want to hole away, they're not going to make any money if they don't do something, even if it's minimum.
Right.
But the way that I'm engaging with this comic now, I have been very like full throttle into like trying to promote it on like TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and wherever else. Um, and I can see where like, you know, with all my like, I guess like I don't know, all my saying about like I'm doing it just for the, you know, having done it, it's still easy to get caught up in the numbers.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you
Oh
get
yeah.
those little hits of dopamine when you get the, you know, all those likes on TikTok and all the comments. Um, so it can be easy to get caught up in that every now and again. So that's kind of a weird space to navigate too. I'm sure you kind of experience that yourself, like with your podcast. Like like I can see where it could be easy to like get obsessed with how many people are listening and where and
It
why.
is, and that's why I choose as much as I can not to look at the numbers.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's the first thing that you see when you open the Anchor app is how many people have listened to your podcast across platforms. And then I also put them on YouTube. So, the first thing that I see whenever I look at YouTube is how many views it's gotten and everything like that. And then specifically how long people actually like paid attention and listened to your podcast or watched. And so it's like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I still feel like my ultimate goal is to just have people's voices heard, just like I'm sure your ultimate goal is just to tell the story. And
Hmm.
if even if it does it in a small way, even if it only touches like one life or only falls on one person's ears that really cares, that's enough for me. That's enough.
Yeah.
Plus it's
Yeah.
just fun. It's just fun.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
That's a big important part. I mean, there's always going to be things that aren't like 100% fun. Like, I'm sure that the editing isn't always that fun. And like for me, I mean, like the constant like I guess fixing of my website and like doing all the preliminary sketches isn't always like the most fun part. Um, but at this point, I think, and once again, I have to give a little bit of props to MSA for like honing a very specific artist work ethic really early on for any medium. Like you learn how to take you learn how to like um I don't know, like get into being able to like accept the fun with the not fun and be like, okay, like I've got to get through this, bit of actual work here for a minute and then I can get back to the
absolutely.
fun stuff.
Well, and
Um
it definitely promotes a sense of collaboration too. I mean, even like, and that was the wonderful part of MSA was like because of like your involvement with different sides of art, of all of the different sides of art, the like
yeah.
I was part of an artist, I was part of a visual artist, one of their pieces, or actually I've been involved, I think I was involved with a couple of different people's pieces, but like,
Quite
and
the
that's the
model.
thing. Right, absolutely, absolutely. And visual artists helped us with certain things, and music helped us with certain things, and literary helped us with certain things. I mean, it's just that spirit of collaboration is ultimately what I loved. And once again, that was an experience and an education that I would not trade for the world, and makes me happy that
Mhm.
I went to MSA.
Yeah.
Um, but so moving on, let's see. Um, what is one thing about your life you wish you could change?
Honestly, I I don't think I'd want to change very much of anything. I feel like everything I've been through, for better or for worse, has cultivated me into the exact type of person that is capable of being able to do what I do. And obviously not every day is full of sunshine and rainbows, but like I'm generally pretty happy the way I am, and where I'm at in my life. I think that if I had any regret, like I think that there are times when I wish that I was a little less afraid, um, and that I had been, less afraid in the past. But
Right.
every day that goes by, I get a little braver and bolder, and um, you know, more confident with like where my life is going. Um, I find that the like the super like rough anxiety or like existential crises I had in my early 20s, like those start going away. Like I still have that every now and again, but they're so much less frequent now and they're so much less dire.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, I don't think I really need to change much of anything personally.
So how would you change the South for the better if you could?
So there are a lot of things that I would love to change about the South. Um,
Yeah.
but I think like in terms of like achievable goals for me as an individual, um, one of those things that I want to change is kind of how people see the South, both from an outside point of view and from an inside point of view. you know, like change is happening here already. It's really slow, and it's certainly very painful. Um, but I don't think, you know, I see so many people, and I don't blame people for having this mindset where they just want to get out. Um, and I totally understand that mindset. I do not judge anyone for wanting to leave. However, you know, I don't feel like I can just completely abandon what's here when, you know, there is a lot of work that can be done and should be done, and
Yes.
there isn't a reason why I can't try to contribute to some of it. Um, and you know, my main focus is always going to be within the arts here, especially in Oxford where I'm stationed. Um, so you know, for me, like change could result from me like continuing my own involvement and part of as a part of something bigger than me, like the cultivation of the arts here in the South, and you know, showing all the different mindsets that emerge from the South. You know, it's not just a bunch of like, you know, redneck idiots out here. There are a lot of them, but truthfully, you're going to find those anywhere you go in America. They're not just here.
Absolutely.
And I can tell you too that like you'll find the rednecks in Ohio and they do not cook as good. Um, so, um, but yeah, you know, I just think it's important to like, you know, and again, I say this as I do not judge anyone for wanting to leave, especially because it can be such a hostile place for so many. But if I have the ability to do something, then I'd like to, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, that's part of, you know, that's part of why I do this podcast too, you know, is I talk about, you know, how a lot of voices in the LGBT community are not heard, and a lot of people in the LGBT community are not heard in the South. But also a lot of Southern voices are dismissed because people just have all of these notions about the South and just automatically, I feel, assume that we don't really have anything of important to say, or that, you know, we're kind of a monolith. But that couldn't be further from the truth, you know.
Yeah. I think about how, you know, not too long ago, and it's not the only time this has happened, but I saw like an Ask Reddit thread on Reddit, and it, the question was something like, you know, what's the worst state you could possibly go to? And the top answer by far from like hundreds of thousands of people was Mississippi. And I was reading through all these comments talking about like why Mississippi sucked and why you should never go there. You shouldn't even drive through there if you can help it. And there were a lot of things that I mean, that made me kind of mad about it. And I found myself surprised at how defensive I felt. But I mean, part of it is just the fact that like, you know, like it's easy to like stereotype Mississippi into the place where it's just like, oh, well, there's nothing but a bunch of, you know, dumbass, like racist rednecks there. And it's like, okay, those are the people in power here. But you're
Yes.
forgetting that Mississippi has like by far the largest percentage of people of color by state, like in the
Yeah,
whole country. And like for you to like, you're not thinking about all those people who they live here and they can't leave. Um and
exactly.
like I think it's a little bit cruel to like basically want to throw away a state when you're forgetting that this is people's home. Um
Well, and it's
and
it's also just
yeah.
it's the most chicken shit thing ever too, because it's like, oh girl, like I really hate that for you, walks away. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
it's like, God, you must be so oppressed. I'm gonna do nothing about it but like mock your government and do nothing to really try to promote change for you. Like that's the thing. I mean, of course, change for states like Mississippi definitely mostly has to come from within. And that's the hardest part. But like the thing
Hmm.
is, you know, it's hard for us to coalesce and come together whenever, you know, all of us feel kind of spread out across the state too. I mean, there are pockets here and there, but you know, like um it's hard whenever you feel like you have a wave, a tsunami of voices that are drowning you out, you know.
Hmm.
um and so yeah, just to completely dismiss people from the South, And that's not me saying like you definitely need to come to Mississippi, because like honestly, honey, there's like hardly shit here to do. But like, I mean, there's some shit here to do, but like
Yeah, come to
it's not.
Oxford.
I was gonna say it's not like I if I was from anywhere else, I would not want to vacation for a week in Mississippi. Absolutely not. Maybe a day, but like a week, no.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, no, like you do kind of become defensive, and you become defensive and you become apologetic, but at the same time it's hard not to also want to take part and being like, yeah, I was in high school, like the hangout spot was Sonic Drive-In, and like
Yeah.
the way that you knew you were the coolest was if your truck was the loudest.
Yeah.
So um but yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I think it's like with anything, like you can appreciate something while being critical of it at the same time. Um,
Absolutely.
and like I'm very I love my home. I love Oxford. I love our state. Um, and I am extremely critical of how it's run. And I don't think that those two things have to be um like I don't think those two things have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a more productive way to think as well, because if you just spend all your time hating it and you don't think anything can change, then you're not going to do anything to actually help. You're not going to see the possibility for things to get better. Um, and I do want to, like, quick aside to, I guess, like, I don't know, say that, like, this is all coming from a straight passing white woman in the South. So in a way, it's like I don't want to speak too much on it, because my voice is like, I don't know, like, it has a certain amount of weight, for better or worse.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so all I want to, like I guess, I don't know what the word is, like, the roundabout way of saying it is just that, like, the issues that you see in the South are everywhere. They're not
yeah,
just here. Um, like, I saw more Confederate flags in Ohio than I did in Mississippi, which made no sense.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but it's true. Like, poverty, and racism and homophobia and sexism, like, permeate everything in America. And just because you, like, go out to Denver doesn't mean that they're not there too.
I think people are
Um,
just more shocked when it's not from the South. I think
yeah,
people just, yeah, people are like, here, no, it could never happen here. But like,
yeah,
yeah, like, no, honey, it does. It does.
yeah.
Um, so next question, and I'm gonna start asking this, audience, to all of my future guests, because right now this is definitely something that's heavy on my mind, and so I think it's just really relevant, and I think it's pertinent to ask anybody. How's your mental
Mhm.
health?
I'm doing all right. I think I'm someone who, I have to be careful about stretching myself too thin. Um, it's like Bilbo says in Lord of the Rings, like, I'm in the habit of extending myself like butter scraped over too much bread. Um, I I have a habit of, like, I don't say yes to things out of guilt. I say yes to things because I have a lot of confidence in the amount of energy I have, sometimes too much confidence. And so, like, I forget that I'm a mortal being who has to, like, eat and sleep. And I'm like,
Yeah.
if I just didn't have to do those things, then I could do all the other stuff I want to do. Um, and so, I've gotten much better at, like, managing, like, burnout over the years, and, like, preventing it. I feel it, like, creeping up on me a little bit with, like, how much effort I've been putting into this comic and Quasar, which I'll talk about at the end, and and just my day job,
Yeah,
because I work at a bank for a 9 to 5. Um, so, like, it's a lot, but everything's kind of always a lot with me.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's kind of just how it is. But I'm doing all right. all things considered.
That's heartening. That's really heartening to hear. I'm glad to hear that for you. So if you could give any advice or words of wisdom to your younger self, your childhood self, what would they be?
I think that the best piece of advice I could give is that you are going to fuck up. You're going to fuck up. People who love you are also going to fuck up, and it's going to happen. And you do not have to be perfect, and you do not have to beat yourself up for not being perfect. And with that knowledge, use that knowledge to practice a little bit more patience and empathy with the people that you care about, because they're not perfect either. So like, mostly I would just advise myself to give myself a little bit more patience, because I certainly didn't.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm learning right now in therapy is, having patience with yourself, having forgiveness for yourself, having kindness for yourself
It's
is
so hard.
it is
Like,
really hard.
it sounds kind of easy on the surface, but when you actually start to try to practice, like, it's really hard not to beat yourself up over stuff. Little things even, like,
and beating yourself up almost sounds like an understatement sometimes, because like sometimes, like, I don't know if it has been the same for you, but like I will just say some of the nastiest shit to myself, just like just some of like the worst, just some of the worst things that I would never say to anybody out loud, but like, it's one of those things where it's like, no, like you need to embrace kindness. You need to a good friend of mine told me, you need to learn to extend the same kindness to yourself that you extend to other people, and that's like something that I'm trying to work on, daily. So I'm glad that you're kind of figuring out that alchemy for yourself right now.
Yeah.
So Anna, this is the end of the episode. I've loved talking to you, honestly. Like, I'm so glad that we have been able to reconnect. I'm so glad to see you again. I your energy at MSA was infectious. I liked hanging around you because, I don't know, you were very calming. You were definitely, you felt
calming.
Like, oh my God. It was definitely, it was like a nice reprieve from being around the theater kids, you know what I mean, all the time, around my, let me rephrase that. It was a reprieve from being around my theater family for, a long, all the time. And it was nice to have a voice that was outside of whatever was going on there. It was nice to hear what somebody else was doing for once, and I don't know, you were always just a very genuine and kind human being. So I'm glad that we have gotten to reconnect. I'm glad to see that you're doing so well. And I guess that leads right into my final question, which is, are there any shout outs, promotions, or philanthropic opportunities that my audience should know about?
Yeah, so I have two. Obviously I would like to promote my webcomic. It's ongoing. As of this recording, well, I guess by the time this is this is coming out on Friday. So
yeah,
when you hear this, by the time you hear this, the last update will have been last Tuesday. It updates every other Tuesday, the webcomic does. And I also have a Patreon for it, where if you want to, you can go there and donate any amount of money you feel comfortable donating, from like $3 to $10. And it helps me keep the lights on for it, and pay for Photoshop and stuff. But the comic itself is totally free to the public. It's at balladofthewitchdoctor.com. And go check it out. It's the thing I'm most passionate about right now. And it gives me so much delight to have people interested in it. The other thing I'd like to promote is, I wanted to talk to people a little bit about this organization I'm part of called Quasar. It's an arts and literary community and magazine that me and another MSA alumni and a few Ole Miss alumni have started here in Oxford. Quasar is an arts group which caters to creative young adults through monthly events. And we have this intention to like foster a safe and inclusive arts environment while also giving the space to be like experimental, especially if you're an emerging artist and you're trying to like figure out some stuff. Our events are kind of like, they're sort of like open mic nights, but for any medium. And they're completely free to the public, both to participate in and to attend. And we, at these events, we have music, we have poetry readings, we have visual art on display, we have performances, and they're really cool. Our next Quasar is going to be on the night of the 26th here in Oxford, Mississippi. It's going to be at the Old Armory Pavilion, and you can find all this stuff on Facebook if you look it up. We're going to have free food and beverages there. Wear a mask if you go, and you can find out more about it also on our Instagram, which is quasar.arts. And I should spell quasar. It's like the space phenomenon. Phenomenon. Quasar. Quasar. So yeah, those are my two plugs.
And one last plug that I guess I would like for you to shout out is where can people find you on Instagram if you're comfortable, because you do post a lot of your art and stuff on there.
Oh yeah, I forgot. So I've got the two Instagrams. One for the webcomic and then one that's just me. My main Instagram, which has links to everything else, is it's dadgum devil. Like the southern iteration of goddamn. Dad gum devil. It's always gonna be that too. I like it. And yeah, that's where you can find me on pretty much any social media platform, but Instagram especially.
Excellent. Well, Anna, thank you so much once again for being on the show. Let's keep in touch. I cannot wait to talk to you again, honey.
Yes. This has been so fun.
Oh my God, for real. And honestly, I may have to have you back for another installment. Maybe we can do some fun collaboration in the future. I don't know, but I just want to work with you somehow or another in the future.
Well, hit me up. You know where to find me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.